Good morning. Our words of welcome are from Susan McGinn. She says, "From beyond the playful summer clouds, beyond the earth's thin blue line, from beyond the bright moon and meteor showers, we hear the call to look and listen carefully, to turn away from a world that buys and sells happiness, to fully experience the luring whisper of your heart's truth. Why not today? Why not now? We are here and together at home in this evolving place, home in this ever-changing breath and body, home in this dewy morning, even as it reaches toward a hot, high noon. We hear the call from far beyond and deep within, and we do not hear it alone. Come, let us worship together." And so today's service, we have Robert as service leader and Michael Reason on piano, with technical support by Kat Barnett, Roy Haynes, and Charlie Jacobs. Participating remotely, I'm participating remotely from North Carolina, and Susie Lindeman is also presenting, Linda Jessen singing, with Trudy Crippen, Colleen Berry, and Pamela Cousineau providing remote technical support. And so I just want to welcome you with live from various places on the internet and of course Fellowship Hall. This is our LCUUF Sunday service. Now, this is a kind of request of personal preference. Some people like to have their cameras on and some people don't. I don't mind if you have your camera on. It actually is kind of interesting to get feedback from folks, not just sort of like looking out into the audience when we're actually together. But others don't want the distraction. I want to tell you that there are ways to eliminate that distraction. Typically, if you're on a laptop computer or a computer screen, go into the upper right corner and you'll find a little box. And that box, if you hover over it, it'll say something like full screen view. Click on that, you'll get a full screen view and a little column of some of the people that are on video. Go to the top of that column, you'll find three little rectangle thingies. Click the smallest one and that column will go away. Now you're only focused on the presenter. If you're on a tablet or something like that, at the bottom you'll have a little row of people on video. Click the minus sign and it'll go down to 1. Click it again and it'll go away. At least I think that's how it works. I don't have a tablet in front of me. So with that, hopefully you can enjoy this service however you like it. Now our announcements were on a slideshow before the service. If you didn't see them, no worries. We will post a link to them early this week in our sharing. And now it's our time to light the chalice.
Good morning. Let us light our chalice. Our chalice lighting words today are by David Braden. Our light is the light of the sun, keeper of all we love. Our light is the light of the earth, provider of sustenance. Our light is the light of all living things, life precious like our own. Our light is the light in each of us, bound together in need and hope. Our light is the light of the cosmos, keeper of all that we know. Our hymn is Come Whoever You Are. It is based on words by the Sufi mystic and poet Jalal ad-Din Rumi. Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community which cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow you wish to share today, you can type it into chat and we'll try to read those out loud. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns. Whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You are welcome to type in the sorrows and concerns into the chat box.
Not on. Oh, sorry. From Bob Coaches and Kathy, please light a candle for the loss of our daughter's heart dog, Hershey, a 13-year-old chocolate Labrador. And for me, light a candle, please, for the passing of my friend and bridge partner, Don Ross, who died Thursday night in his sleep through complications of dengue fever.
Now let us recall the joys. Whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy and peace for yourselves and others, you are welcome to type your joys in the chat box. From Sue Kelly. Sue and Kelly celebrated their 61st anniversary Saturday, August 15th.
I have one more sorrow that just came in from Joan Bellamy. My dad, who worked for the post office for 43 years, would be horrified by what's happening to the post office. And from Colleen, prayers for all the children and staff returning to schools. May they be kept safe.
And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. We will light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
A reading is a poem, The Patience of Ordinary Things, by Pat Schneider. It is a kind of love, is it not? How the cup holds the tea, how the chair stands sturdy and foursquare, how the floor receives the bottoms of shoes or toes, how soles of feet know where they're supposed to be. I've been thinking about the patience of ordinary things, how clothes wait respectively in closets, how soap dries quietly in the dish, and towels drink the wet from the back of the skin, and the lovely repetition of stairs. And what is more generous than a window?
Winnie the Pooh and Piglet are having a conversation. When you wake up in the morning, Pooh, said Piglet, what's the first thing you say to yourself? "What's for breakfast?" said Pooh. "What do you say, Piglet?" "I say, I wonder what's going to happen exciting today." Pooh nodded thoughtfully. "It's the same thing," he said. But for most of us, breakfast, if we eat breakfast, and what's exciting are not the same thing. Most of our everyday activities are not in and of themselves exciting or joyful or meaningful. Even in retirement or semi-retirement, there's still a to-do list, and there are still people making demands on us, often bringing stress and frustration. Wouldn't it be nice if at least some of these activities could become stress-reducing instead of stressful, spirit-lifting instead of spirit-draining? Wouldn't it be nice if our everyday activities could help transform us into spiritually grounded beings, centered and balanced? The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh famously writes of being in the present moment when washing dishes. He says, "When washing dishes, one should only be washing the dishes," which means that while washing the dishes, one should be completely aware of the fact that one is washing the dishes. Even in the stress of wartime, some activities seem to lend themselves to helping us become centered and balanced. Victoria Safford, a UU minister colleague, tells of this. She says, "I read somewhere of a military chaplain who served in World War II in England, who recalled conversations with young soldiers during the war. He remembered especially those who served in the Air Force and the Navy when he asked them about fear, when he asked them about loneliness and how they survived. They told her of long hours alone, watching the infinite expanses of the sky or sea at night. They seemed to him to be wise beyond their years, centered and calm. Their comrades in the army, on the other hand, were almost always busy on the ground and rarely spoke of such things to the chaplain, who remained intrigued all his life by the accidental assignment to a contemplative post and the way that some men had fallen by grace into the embrace of emptiness. But for most of us, life doesn't offer the chance to fall into long stretches of contemplative time. True, we might be able to take a daily walk in silence, but how many of us have our phone with us catching up on friends or family? Especially in this time of pandemic, we have to be clever in creating spiritual practice out of every day. There are, of course, many more intentional practices that can carry us beyond calm into spiritual depth. I sometimes repeat a mantra, a single spiritual word or phrase as a way to calm my mind and to redirect the internal verbal chatter away from worries or fears. A daily half-hour meditation practice forms the core of my spiritual practice. Having access to such tools can be particularly valuable during the times like these, times of great stress or uncertainty. I realize that creating a regular or even daily spiritual practice requires time and commitment. But let's face it, even if we're given stretches of time that could be used for silence and contemplation, most of us still avoid using it for that purpose. When we're cooking in the kitchen, a TV is chatting away softly in the other room. When we're working in the garden, there are earbuds in our ears playing a podcast. Why do we go to these efforts to avoid the silence? We avoid the silence often because we are afraid of what the silence might bring. It allows uncomfortable thoughts and emotions to arise within us, and we may have to deal with them. Dealing with them may lead to spiritual transformation, and then we'd have to deal with the changes. For most of us, it's easier to just roll with the flow and let everyday life distract us. What we need is a gradual daily practice that gently opens us to silence so that we can become centered and calm, confident that we can handle most situations as they arise. The gradual path is about training our mind so that It is our ally as we try to discern and carry out our life's purpose. Winnie the Pooh and Piglet.
A Journey by Edward Field. When he got up that morning, everything was different. He enjoyed the bright spring day, but he did not realize it exactly. He just kind of enjoyed it. And walking down the street to the railroad station, past the magnolia trees with dying flowers like old socks, it was a long time since he had breathed so simply. Tears filled his eyes, and it felt good, but he held them back because men don't walk around crying in that town. Waiting on the platform at the station, the fear came over him that something terrible was about to happen. The train was late, and he recited the alphabet to keep hold. And in time it came screeching in. And as it went on, making its usual stops, people coming, people going, telephone poles passing, he hid his head behind a newspaper. No longer able to hold back the sobs, he willed his eyes to follow the rational weavings of the fabric of the seat in front of him. He didn't do anything violent as he had imagined. He cried for a long time. But when he finally quieted down, a place in him that had been closed like a fist was finally open. And at the end of the ride, he stood up and he got off that train. And through the streets and in all the places he lived in, later on, he walked himself at last, a man among men, with such radiance that everyone looked up and wondered.
Well, let us take a little time for meditation, a little time to find our own center and grounding. We might start by finding our balance in our bodies, closing or softening our eyes as we like, and just turn into your body. You might want to notice your breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Just notice it. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to change it, but just notice it. And we'll sit here for a couple moments, and you might just notice as other thoughts come up, as your mind moves away from noticing the breath. And when it does, the practice is simple. Just bring your mind back. Don't beat it up, because actually that is the gift of the practice, is the bringing back, the noticing, the bringing back. So back to the breath. Has your mind wandered? If so, just bring it back. Has your mind gone off to a thought or a sound? Just come back. And that's the essence of this practice, to continue to do this for as long as you like. And now we'll come back into this time and this space to be together again. Some spiritual teachers would have us believe that real growth only happens if you have some sudden, transformative mystical experience, a mystical awakening or enlightenment or flash of insight. I mean, think of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree, or Paul on the road to Damascus. The popular mystical writer Eckhart Tolle describes an enlightenment experience early in his career. Tolle went to bed one night deeply depressed, feeling, I couldn't live with myself any longer. And in this, a question arose without an answer. Who is this I that cannot live with the self? What is the self? I felt drawn into a void. I didn't know at the time what was really happening was that my man-made self, with its heaviness, its problems, that lives between the unsatisfying past and the fearful future, had collapsed. It dissolved. The next morning, I woke up and everything was so peaceful. The peace was there just because there was no self, just a sense of presence or beingness, just observing and watching. The popular mystical writer Eckhart Tolle describes an enlightenment experience early in his career. Tolle went to bed one night deeply depressed, feeling, I couldn't live with myself any longer. And in this question arose without an answer. Who is the I that cannot live with the self? I felt drawn into a void. I didn't know at that time what really had happened was that the mind-made self, with its heaviness, its problems, that lives between the unsatisfying past and the fearful future, collapsed. It dissolved. The next morning I woke up and everything was so peaceful. The peace was there because there was no self, just a sense of presence or beingness, just observation and watching. Are such big experiences of transformation the only ones that count? I mean, not to discount Tolle, but what about more everyday experiences? One of my favorite passages from sacred literature is the Song of the Precious Mirror Samadhi by Tongshan Langchi, who was the founder of Soto Zen Buddhism in the 9th century. In his poem is this line, now there are sudden and gradual in which teachings and approaches arise. Sudden and gradual. I believe he's talking about awareness or enlightenment or spiritual transformation. Such things can come on to us in a sudden way, a flash of insight, or they may gradually develop over a long time. He continues with a line, when teachings and approaches are distinguished, each has its standard. I think Lang Chi was telling us that any spiritual teaching or approach has its own merit or value, no matter how it arose. Wisdom gained from gradual, everyday spiritual practices is as valuable as the teaching that emerges from a sudden insight. Rabbi Mark Glickman writes of sudden and gradual in prayer. He says, and I quote, there are two elements of prayer in Judaism. The first, keva, is fixed prayer, set prayer, scripted prayer. Keva means praying in set ways at set times with a certain set of words, whether we want to or not. The other element, kavana, intention, is the prayer that comes from our hearts. It's the special and indescribable sense of connection that we feel with God at the very pinnacle of our worship experience. Kavana is the goal, but Judaism teaches that the way we get there is through keva. Only out of the rhythm, habit, and even the drudgery of repeated, organized prayer can our hearts soar to heaven and connect with God. Worship takes practice. Joy demands preparation. True spontaneity needs to be rehearsed. And when it works, it can be magnificent and move us to tears. To put this another way, the gradual path takes practice. It takes effort. It can be very ordinary and seem like nothing at all is happening. But a consistent, gradual practice can set the stage for the sudden to break through. And it can be magnificent and move us to tears. My own spiritual practice is built on the gradual, the everyday. The small experiences of sudden do occur on rare occasions. A few years ago, I was in this outlet mall, one of those prime outlet malls. Now, this one was actually in Puerto Rico, but it was like all the others. Cookie cutter design with the same stores, Ann, Tommy, Liz, Calvin, and pretty much all the same merchandise. I was not really shopping, just window shopping, killing time as I waited for others. I was just there, no attachment to the items for sale, not looking, not pricing, not comparing, just moving through the spaces, observing the people selling and buying without thought, without opinion. Suddenly, I find myself overcome by an experience of pure joy at being alive. I hold an awareness of the intertwined complexity of suffering and hardship that is this life, an awareness that does not interrupt, but in fact increases my joy and gratitude. It is a beautiful world. That is so clear. I am very happy for all the people who surround me and all the things around me, a family and a stray dog and the trees and the fruit and the hills and green, warm breeze and the smell of food and the sparkle of light on water. I was witness to the vitality of life and took it all in, and the flow of events of the day and that of life, the sense of the innate goodness in the world. These feelings of warmth and floating, of detachment and complete immersion stayed with me for many minutes, fading only when I began to try to name it or describe to myself what I was experiencing. Perhaps that wasn't such a good move. The Portuguese poet Carlos Drummond de Andrade writes of trying to describe a sudden spiritual experience. In the middle of the road, there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the road. There was a stone in the middle of the road. There was a stone. Never should I forget this event in the life of my fatigued retinas. Never should I forget that in the middle of the road, there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the road. In the middle of the road, there was a stone. For De Andrade, even a stone can be a teacher. Now, a couple of warnings as you begin to explore and introduce gradual, daily, or otherwise regular spiritual practices into your life. First, we can get attached to elements of spiritual or religious practice and forget about the real purpose of the practice. We can get attached to how wonderful our teachers are rather than the nature of the teaching. We can get attached to a particular format of Sunday worship without giving any attention to what the worship is trying to accomplish. We can get attached to performance, getting so focused on holding a meditation posture or a breathing pattern that we lose focus on where this practice is taking us. The spiritual writer Alan Watts tells us, the common error of ordinary religious practice is to mistake the symbol for the reality, to look at the finger pointing the way, and then to suck it for comfort rather than follow it. So if our practice is the finger pointing at the moon, let's go to the moon rather than hanging on to the finger. A second concern is this. Some go through the motions of religious observation, the communal prayer or group meditation, but it's all public piety. It's all for show. Is it any surprise that Jesus warns his followers, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners so that they may be seen by others? Instead, he tells them to go into their rooms and shut the door. In other words, to find a place of solitude and quiet. I admit I struggle with this sometimes because part of my work is to guide and to teach. And so in telling the story of my experience at that outlet mall, I had to ask myself, am I showing off? Or am I offering a small example of value to some of you? How might you find a spirituality in your everyday life? You might start gradually, even with breakfast. Some may even start before breakfast with meditation or prayer or some other formal practice. Or you might simply try doing any of your ordinary everyday tasks, eating, washing the dishes, showering, with a sense of attentiveness and one-pointedness. Some of us may find that a hobby or avocation, gardening, listening to music, art, even service to others, may similarly allow for calm, focused attention. In such a place, you may hear life humming the song of its unified form, and you may know in your very bones that you are here for me to be. Occasionally, you may even be given the gift of the sudden. It may be brief. It may not always feel like a gift unless we are open to those possibilities. There may be a shift of an emotional shift that reaches deep into your body, through your soul, into your very self. And it may not contain any words, nor are there adequate words to describe it. And if you try later to explain it to others, it might feel embarrassing or even impossible. But you know that you are changed. Perhaps you are now aware of the love, the generosity of ordinary things around you. Perhaps there's a place in you that had been closed up like a fist that is now open. Perhaps you glimpse the moon itself rather than the finger pointing at the moon. And then you turn to your partner or your housemate or just to yourself and you say, "What's for breakfast?"
To see the world in a grain of sand, and a leaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
One of the great unsung heroes of the music industry over the past 100 years is Leon Russell. He is a tour de force, really, and not that many people have actually heard of him. But he was a huge influence on music in the 60s and 70s. He had a solo career as a pianist, a singer, and more importantly, as a songwriter. Some of his songs are things like this, this song is for you, this masquerade, and the one I'm about to play, and one of my favorite of his songs, Superstar. He was a huge influence on the music industry at the time. And Elton John, believe it or not, in Elton John's early years was the support act for Leon Russell when he was on tour. Elton John said very recently that Leon Russell had been the biggest influence on him as a piano player, a singer, and a songwriter. Leon Russell died in November 2016, but his legacy is amazing, and a lot of his songs have been covered by many, many artists. This version of Superstar is the one that I prefer. It's the one that was made famous by the Carpenters, and I tried to recreate Richard Carpenter's arrangement in my little box of tools here sitting by my side, known as a PC computer. So please enjoy Superstar by Leon Russell.
Our closing words are by Zen Master Ryokan. Too lazy to be ambitious, I let the world take care of itself. 10 days worth of rice in my bag, a bundle of twigs by my fireplace. Why chatter about delusion and enlightenment? Listening to the night rain on my roof, I sit comfortably with both legs stretched out. May you too sit comfortably in the spiritual practice of your everyday life, both legs stretched out.
Please stay around if you like for discussion. We will start with small groups of about 8, and you can turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves. If you're with your group, you can click leave. You'll come back to the main room. We'll have discussion there, or you can ask to go to another room. Here are some possible questions to discuss. Okay, see you in groups.